This program is a Warren STEIBEL production in association with SECA. Funding for Firing Line is made possible by a major grant from the John M. OLIN Foundation, Incorporated. Additional support is provided by the LAUREL Foundation, L. John Polite, Jr., and the Friends of Firing Line.
Rush Limbaugh is, by everyone's reckoning, a phenomenon, the most spectacular media success of recent years. His preeminent medium is a culture almost ignored by American critics, even the most beady-eyed, because it's assumed that nobody who really counts spends time listening to people talk over the radio. We should have taken more seriously the polls that for a couple of decades have told us that 1/3 of the American people get all their news from radio. It is news that Rush Limbaugh sets out to give, though he could not perform as he does without reading the scores of daily newspapers and weekly magazines he chews up. His medium is opinion. Advise him that the moon yesterday was caught blinking at the sun, and he will run that through his cosmology and come up with a meaning for it all. And if the episode was good news, responsibility for that good news would be the Founding Fathers or Ronald Reagan or Clarence Thomas. If it was bad news, probably it was Teddy Kennedy or the National Organization for Women or the Americans at Liberties Union that is responsible for that frolic. What astonishes is that no one is surprised and only the humorless are really offended. In this sense, it's fair to say, I suppose, that he gets away with his scams as no one since Norman Lear got away with his in his series All in the Family, done at the expense of every conservative position ever held, and glorious entertainment it was. Rush Limbaugh was born to a family of lawyers, fooled around doing this and that for a while, decided not to sell potato chips for a living, went to Sacramento as a DJ, then came to New York City a few years ago. Veni, Vidi, Vici, as they said about Julius Caesar. He came, he saw, and he conquered. His latest book is called The Way Things Ought to Be, and he will be continuing his television program begun only a few days ago. We're here in the height of a national election, and I intend to ask him, are liberal vulnerabilities finally apparent? For instance, there's a difference between rights for women and the feminization of all life. Do you agree that this difference is now almost everywhere apparent?
Well, I'm conflicted about it because I do. In fact, when I wrote this book, I decided to end it with a chapter entitled We're Winning, because I saw in the Clarence Thomas hearings and subsequent events hysteria. I have postulated that for some we need to change the symbol of this country from the eagle to a dilapidated, near-death, dehydrated big sow with hundreds of thousands of little piglets attempting to suckle from this sow, but there's nothing left, and yet they think they're entitled to more. The fact that we're out of money, the fact that we simply don't have the resources to accomplish liberalism is what I thought was the reason for their hysteria, and was reason for happiness, and it may be a tempered joy at the fact that ultimately we were winning. Not that it was totally winnable ever, or is, but that in the seesaw battle back and forth that we were winning. Well, now I'm having doubts about this, because as you point out, we're looking not at just women's issues becoming dominant, but if you don't accept the feminist agenda, you're a Neanderthal, you're a bigot. Well, so it seems to me that the party that represents this big spending, the party that represents the idea that government program and plan can solve every problem is going to triumph. As we sit here and tape today, it's distressing.
But suppose we take a couple of distinctions, some of which have to do with money and some of which don't. Obviously, if all women who want to work are entitled to have somebody materialized to look after their children at the taxpayer's expense, that takes money. Now, that I would consider to be moot in the sense that some people are against it and some people are for it, and it's a money question. But
I think it's an ideological question as well.
Well, sure. Most money questions really are. But take, for instance, the disposition of a lot of college newspapers to refer to the matriculating freshmen as fresh persons. Now, it seems to me, as long as that is endured, you can't say with any confidence that the difference between women's rights and the feminization of culture is distinct. But do you have any happy signs to point to that suggest that people do balk at extremes?
Well, as I say, I'm conflicted about it. As one who lives in the environment, as one who studies it and comments on it, of course, one is focused on the negative. You look for things to warn people about and find fault with. As I say, Bill, before the current election campaign, I did feel that the extremism of these positions was showing, and that it would be increasingly difficult for mainstream people to adopt them. And I think one of the reasons that I decided to accept the offer from the publisher to write this book was to warn people about the fact that, people say, Rush, all you do is talk about the extremes of these movements. All you do is talk about how these, the oddballs and the kooks and the fringe are these, as though they're mainstream. Well, they're becoming mainstream. They are beginning to define these various agendas. How else the situations you describe become prevalent? Political correctness, I think, is founded in large part to feminist issues. I mean, I've met a woman, a series of women recently with the Anita Hill situation. Look at this, Bill. It matters not whether she was telling the truth. What matters, they say now, is the way she was treated by those men. Well, how else was she supposed to be treated? This is the big leagues. She came forth not just to keep somebody off the court, but try to ruin a man's life. And I found it interesting that in the New York senatorial primary of the Democratic side, Geraldine Ferraro and Liz Holtzman were treating each other far worse, and with far less respect than Anita Hill was treated. But I didn't hear any feminists saying, why, this is unfortunate, the way these women are treating each other is clouding the issue and so forth. In 1990, there were more Republican women seeking high office than there are in 1992, yet nobody called it the year of the women. They do this year because of the year of the liberal woman. And
well, but is there an enormity committable by the women's movement, which yesterday or day before yesterday would have got by because we were trained to be obsequious in respect of women's assertions, that wouldn't get by today, that permits you to make references that you make on your program without being shot the minute you leave the studio?
Oh, I think so. I think one of the, this is a long roundabout way to the answer to your question, but I think the simple fact of this country remains that the dominant media culture in this country does not believe in the things that the vast majority of people in the country do believe in, and even go so far as to impugn and make fun of those things. Something as rudimentary as belief in God, morality and virtue and character being important things in leadership. Those things are all clouded and shoved aside and made fun of, not only in the news, but in television shows and movies, stuff coming out of the entertainment community. But if you look at the polls of the American people as to whether or not Anita Hill was believed, I mean, let's face it, those 2 weeks was a frontal assault on the minds of the American people. And yet, after those 2 weeks, the polls all showed that among any group of people, including black women, it was at least 65% who did not believe her. So that indicates there's a nucleus of people who do not accept this extremism.
In the light of what you just said, though, how do you reconcile the mobilization of women against, for instance, the senator from Pennsylvania who voted very ostentatiously against Anita Hill? In other words, there has been a mobilization of strictly feminine support on Anita Hill's side. The American Bar Association heard Mrs. Gore speak emphatically about the postulated innocence of Anita Hill. How do you reconcile that with your optimism on that issue?
Well, I think one of the problems is that Senator Specter, the opponent of Ms. Yackel in that state, has some baggage above and beyond the Anita Hill escapade.
They had something else in mind?
Like the fact that he supported or opposed the nomination of Robert Bork. I mean, there are many things I think that
but
give
Ms.
him
Yackel
trouble.
didn't stress that, though, did she?
No, she didn't stress that, but Well, I mean, her strength, do you think it's entirely due to the Anita Hill episode and the fact that she came forth?
We're being asked to believe that. We're being asked to believe that.
Well, I know they'd like us to believe that.
I'd like to disbelieve that.
They would like us to believe that.
Right.
I think there's a lot of what they would like us to believe that ain't necessarily so. Let's trace this Anita Hill business. When Lynn Yackel first announced her candidacy, it was on the basis that she wasn't believed. Anita Hill wasn't believed, and how dare Anita Hill be accused of perjury, and how this or that, Arlen Specter dare do it. Then they found out, well, that's not the way to go here because most people didn't believe Anita Hill, so they changed it midstream, and now what they're saying is it was the way she was treated. And we were asked about this the other night at a seminar we attended together. Professor Ogletree from Harvard asked me about the role of women's issues in the campaign, and my answers were all oriented toward feminism. He said, why are you talking about feminism? I asked you about women's issues. And I said, well, aren't they the same thing? And I do think that there is, in the interplay between men and women, both socially and professionally now, there is rampant confusion. You've got women trying to be what they think they should be in order to please somebody, and you've got men trying to figure out what they're supposed to be in these kinds of situations.
But are we headed towards sanity on the issue, or are we not headed to sanity in the issue?
Well, my
it comes up not only with women, but for instance on gay rights. In my judgment, there's such a thing as gay rights. I think that, gays are citizens. On the other hand, to take the position that there ought to be sort of an affirmative action movement for gays is obviously to go further than is reasonable, or to assume that there should be conjugal relationships between gays seems to be unreasonable. Well, that's why I'm asking whether there are transparencies that the Rush Limbaugh program depends on in a distilling sense of reason by the public that separates fanaticism from that which is reasonable.
Well, there are. I attempt to focus on some of the humor of some of the things which are said. I mean, I think in the final analysis, it's humorous to listen to the reasons why. Carol Moseley, can I give you some examples? Carol Moseley Braun, who's running for Senate seat in Chicago, in Illinois, said that, well, the reason women should be reelected and elected in mass numbers is that they, and they alone, can nurture the economy and nurture the country back to health. I don't know what that means. And if you don't accept that, you're some kind of cad. If you question I mean, I always thought feminism was about getting away from the characteristic of nurturing, which means to take care of and to help along. And now I'm told, no. The feminism has done a total shift, and the superiority of all feminine characteristics are now what is being attempted to be forced on people, and so nurturing is something that the economy needs because men can't do it.
Well, what do you think she did mean?
I don't think she knows what she means, Bill.
Well, she might have meant that the women are the big spenders. They are. They make, what, 75% of the spending decisions in the household. Did she mean that to pick up consumer spending, or did she mean something mystical? My own assessment is that she doesn't know what she's talking about. I mean, I think she's just saying something to make it sound like the women
care.
are the Romulus and Remus of
That's
the
right.
anti-recessionary forces.
Care more. I mean, you know, caring and compassion have always been major ingredients in these people. Lynn Yackel said, just one more example, she said 2% of the Senate represents 52% of the population, implying, I assume, that the only reason women are not getting a fair shake in America is because there are only 2 of them in the Senate. The obvious question is, what are we going to do? Have quotas now in the Senate with affirmative action? I mean, everybody in the Senate is duly elected. And there are a number of Democratic male senators who beat Republican women who maybe they should have just given up their seats for the sake of having women in the Senate. I mean, I think that pointing these things out, you get you in a lot of trouble. Mention facts and contradict conventional wisdom that's not supposed to be opposed, and you get in trouble. And now the names that come forth to label you are bigot, racist, sexist, homophobe, pig, all these kinds of things. You have to endure that in doing what we do.
No, yeah, I'm not suggesting that the extremists aren't there. What I'm asking is this: is it progressively plain that they are extremists. For instance, I'm waiting for the day, since style means a lot to me. I'm waiting for a day when people would be laughed out of the campus who use the word fresh person. It's idiot attempt at hermaphroditic excess.
It is, but if you oppose it, you know, you're the one laughed at. As I say, you're the one.
But you do oppose it. You do oppose it.
Well, I do.
I know, but you
I'm brave.
You get laughed at.
I'm courageous. I'm talking about the average people out there. Look, people who are commentators there's a vast argument even I have with good friends who ask me what my purpose with my programs are. And I have a chapter in this book. My success is not determined by who wins elections, and my success is not determined by what issues dominate. My success is determined by how many people listen to my radio show, how many people watch the television show. There's an entertainment characteristic here. And I view myself as courageous. I'll go against the tide. I'll be willing to subject myself to dislike and hatred amongst 80% of the female population of the country, if it takes that in order for me to be truthful and honest with people. But I think on the campus, it's a rare individual who will oppose gay rights. So look at what happened at Brown University. Guy gets thrown out of school for something that in the old days should have been punished for, but not banished from the campus. But
are you saying that 80% of the women are against you? Because I don't think that's true.
No,
that would seem to conflict with something you said earlier, which is that there's a lot of resident good sense out there. For instance, people who thought it perfectly okay to disbelieve Anita Hill.
Right. No, I'm exaggerating a bit, but there are a sizable percentage.
What does your mail show? What does your mail show?
Well, our audience breakdown is about 56% male and 44% female.
Oh, but the mail that comes in from the women, does it show that they are seized with?
Oh no. The only way I know that is by reading critics. The response I get out in the country in the mail and so forth is
affirmative.
Oh, almost all affirmative. But I think that's the way it is. Many people view my radio program as the only one of its kind.
As a purgative, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm going to hear from people who are naturally disposed to be celebratory over the fact that it exists. There are a lot of women, Bill.
By the way, I'm surprised at that, because that's not so in my experience at all. Usually the people who are sore who write. People who are sort of vaguely pleased don't bother to write. I'm glad your experience is different from mine.
Well, it surprises me too. Now, there may be the negative disagreement mail may be going to individual stations, and there are some, but I mean it's not by any means predominant. The affirmative mail is, but you know, this goes back. I mean, the beginning of your question. It really is the feminist agenda, for example. I mean, we can sit here. I have interesting discussions about what feminism is. You go out and most women today don't like the term feminist because of what it's become. But I don't think that the feminist agenda and feminist leaders, which I think who are defined by the media, by the way, I don't think that they represent 2% of the thinking in this country. The extremists, the people driving this movement. But you have so many people who are of the mind that, well, it's of the moment. This is the most recent in the evolution of this issue. This is the way I should be, and so they're acting as they think they should be in order to be approved, or in order to be correct, or what have you. But look at, as you've pointed out, I mean, some of the excesses of the feminist movement in particular, I think, are so far gone that they don't represent. And I do think that most of the female members of this audience of mine are vastly opposed to the feminist.
Well, let me ask you this. Take, say, the issue of women in combat. Now, I take it that the politically correct position is women should be allowed to engage in trench warfare just like men. My own feeling in the matter is that this is not the position of the majority of American women, but that they're strangely mute when the question is debated because they're a little bit afraid of taking a position that sounds like the anti-feminist position.
Precisely.
What do you think?
I think that's absolutely correct.
Now, what about women serving in, say, going to West Point and Annapolis? Do you think that's an issue concerning which there's a consolidation of women's sentiment?
Well, I don't think most women would oppose that if it's looked at just simply as an educational opportunity. My view of women in combat is this. I mean, I find it incredible that a woman says, I am ready to face those guns. I am ready to be courageous. I want to put my life on the line. I'll get in that cockpit. I'll face those surface-to-air missiles. I will go to trench warfare. I will engage in hand-to-hand combat. And then in the office, some guy comes along and says something to them they find sexually offensive, and off they go to some lawyer or government or agency and say, protect me, protect me. There are a lot of inconsistencies here, and I point those out.
Right. Come on. That's not a fair analogy.
Oh, I think
because
it is.
In one situation, there's declared hostility. In the other, there's supposed to be a civil relationship. So a woman who can be prepared to shoot down a Russian fighter pilot isn't necessarily disposed to be friendly towards the office person who wants us to do so.
You don't have to be friendly, but I think you can handle these things yourself. I mean, if you have the fortitude and the constitution to deal with it in one way.
Well, don't you think most women do? I mean, after all, passes are made at women by most men at some point or other, and we don't have anything like the number of lawsuits that represents the number of times that happens, do we?
No, and don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting sexual harassment's a minor thing and should be swept under the rug and is something trivial. But I do think that it is an area where you can show contradictions.
Well, yeah,
among
you can, but also you got the problem of defining harassment. Did Romeo harass Juliet? I mean, I think a very good case could be for it. There he was, just he wouldn't go away. He stayed there right by that tree and mooned at her. Now she reciprocated in due course, but there was the moment of tension when one didn't quite know how she'd respond.
Well, but see, now we're involved into trying to define what we're biologically ordained and programmed to do as being, in fact, a violation of that very nature.
That's right. And that's right. And
that's what feminism really has sought to do.
The initiative is organically the man, isn't it?
Yes.
People would tend to disapprove of the woman who took the initiative in an early romance.
Of course.
There are the obvious exceptions, and they are legendary. But all of this is a part of a culture that the extremists seek to want to corrupt, in my judgment. The idea of putting a woman at one end of a rifle with a bayonet and saying, go ahead and charge along with everybody else, offends me, and I kind of resist the notion that I ought to be responsible for externalizing the reasons why I feel them. And certain things I think I ought to be entitled to feel without being committed to formulating.
Well, see, the very fact that you feel them proves that you are a sexist. And it proves that you're born that way. It proves that you must undergo deep retraining and sensitivity counseling in order to, I mean, this is the, I mean, this is, you know, I mean, we're sending professors now to sensitivity training because they do not use the term Native American as opposed to Indian. We're in this cockamamie idea now that we've got to get rid of the surnames of sports teams because they somehow all of a sudden, after all these years, have become offensive. And I think...
Like chasing the Indians out of Dartmouth.
Yes, yes. Or saying the Washington Redskins football team is offensive and you got to get rid of the term Redskins and so forth. And all of a sudden, can't do the tomahawk chop. You can't do this as a fan at an Atlanta Braves baseball game without supposedly offending Native Americans.
That is fanatical, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, the attempt to redefine Christopher Columbus as the reason for all evil in the Western world. And I always say to people, and that's what multiculturalism is all about, Bill, and I'm troubled by it. These are American kids that are being reprogrammed. And stop and think of this. What is multiculturalism? It is teaching people that which they fled in order to come here to find prosperity, a better life, what have you. And I think multiculturalism is a tool of revenge used by those who failed.
It's an invitation to retribalization.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And to try to convince kids as they're growing up they have no chance in this country. These are American kids, and they're being educated in ways that are not going to prepare them to access the opportunities that exist here. And
I think it's kind of primitive, too. Yesterday, Steve Solars was defeated by an entirely unknown Hispanic because that person was Hispanic, for no other reason. An 18-year congressman, because the notion was actually flattered that you had to be Hispanic in order to represent Hispanic. Now, this is as preposterous as suggesting that you have to be a woman to represent women. After all, women were emancipated by men. I mean, formally emancipated.
Exactly. Well, this is the thing that troubles me about the feminist movement, as you have detailed it and made your inquiries today, is this fractionalization or factionalization of the American. We're all retrenching into groups. We're seeking political strength as member of groups and the individual.
Okay, but do you account in part for the success of your emergence on the American scene because you are protesting this kind of thing? There's got to be some reason other than your natural endowments for this extraordinary toleration of a point of view that has been considered so incorrect politically.
Well, I'm telling you, it's the majority point of view in this country. Look at who wins presidential elections, who always has. If it's a clearly defined case of liberalism versus conservatism.
But liberalism defined as a fanatical extremes on the multicultural issue?
Yes. Liberalism defined any way you choose to define it as it really is today. But the power of the individual. If you listen to the populism of Ronald Reagan, even Ross Perot, I mean, one of the reasons that Perot, I think, was able to latch onto people's hearts so fast is because Perot actually said, you're what makes this country work. Not a plan, not a program. It's you, the ordinary people of this country, working hard, devoting yourselves to virtue and character.
Well, are you the people who make this country not work? Because there's a lot in this country that's not working.
There are more people working in if you're talking about unemployment rate.
No, I'm not. I'm talking about making it function. The fact that the same people we're talking about keep sending a Republican to the White House and Democrats to Congress has resulted in immobilization.
Well, I don't not necessarily agree with that. I think maybe it would be
we'll
good
have
if we
to
had some
postpone
gridlock.
that, but thank you.
Next week on Firing Line, host and syndicated columnist William F. Buckley Jr. takes another look at the upcoming presidential election with fellow columnists John Leo of U.S. News and World Report and Paul Gigot of the Wall Street Journal. Funding for Firing Line was made possible by a major grant from the John M. OLIN Foundation, Incorporated. Additional support was provided by the LAUREL Foundation, L. John Polite, Jr., and the Friends of Firing Line. For information about a video cassette of this program, write to Firing Line, 2700 Cypress Street, Columbia, South Carolina, 29205, or call 803-799-3449. That's Firing Line, 2700 Cypress Street, Columbia, South Carolina, 29205. Or call 803-799-3449.